She posted a photo with another man, and for the first time, the billionaire lost his cool. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. It was 10:42 p.m. when Ethan Carter saw a single photo glowing on his phone screen. She was smiling, standing next to another man, their shoulders too close, her eyes too bright. The caption read simply, "Grateful for today." His pulse thudded in his ears. For the first time in his life, the man known for his icy composure, the billionaire who could silence entire boardrooms with a glance, felt something dangerously human: jealousy. He set the phone down on the glass desk, but his reflection in the window betrayed him. The tight jaw, the clenched fists, the flicker of hurt. "It's just a contract," he muttered under his breath. "She can do whatever she wants." But the words didn't stick. His chest tightened as if every breath demanded control he no longer had. Outside, the New York skyline shimmered, indifferent to his unraveling. On the far end of the city, Claire Bennett, the woman he'd sworn to keep at arm's length, was finishing a charity event. She had no idea that one photo would ignite a storm she couldn't contain. Just months earlier, their relationship had been written in ink, not emotion. A legal arrangement, a deal between power and desperation. She'd needed money to save her father's home. He'd needed a wife to secure an inheritance clause that demanded stability. They signed a contract at his lawyer's office under fluorescent light, a list of rules, boundaries, and promises never to fall in love. And for a while, they both kept their word. He gave her luxury, she gave him silence. They appeared together at events, smiled for cameras, and returned to separate rooms afterward. It was simple, clean, controllable, until it wasn't. He remembered the first time she'd laughed at one of his dry jokes, unexpected, genuine, bright enough to melt through the steel walls he'd built around his heart. Then came the charity gala, where she'd slipped her hand into his without thinking, the faint scent of her perfume lingering long after the crowd had gone. He had told himself it was nothing. But tonight, staring at that picture, nothing felt like betrayal. He opened his phone again, zooming in, searching for context that didn't exist. Was it a friend, a coworker, or someone new? The more he stared, the less control he had over the thoughts spiraling through his mind. His assistant's voice echoed in his memory from earlier that week. "You care more than you admit, sir." He dismissed it with a smirk. Now, the truth stung. Care was too soft a word for what he felt. Possession, longing, fear, they all collided into one emotion he'd spent his life avoiding. He stood, pacing the marble floor, trying to reason with himself. "She has the right to live her life," he whispered. But the phone buzzed again, a message from the same account that had tagged her. "Lovely couple tonight," the words burned. His hand slammed the desk before he could stop himself. For a moment, the cold, calculated billionaire disappeared, replaced by a man who didn't know what to do with his own heart. He wanted to call her, demand an explanation, but what right did he have? Their marriage wasn't real. Except now, every part of him wished it was. He poured a drink he didn't taste, staring at the swirling amber like it might tell him what went wrong. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that this wasn't about pride or control, it was about fear. The fear of losing something he was never supposed to want in the first place. And for the first time, Ethan Carter, the man who ruled empires, realized he could lose everything over one simple truth. He had fallen in love with his own wife. The night did not end for Ethan Carter. Even after the city fell asleep, he could not. The photo kept burning in his mind like a quiet flame that refused to die. He turned off his phone, but his reflection in the window was still there. Sharp, angry, and strangely afraid. He had never allowed emotions to dictate his moves. In the world of billion-dollar deals, losing your cool meant losing control. Yet here he was, replaying her smile beside another man again and again. By morning, his mansion was silent except for the hum of the espresso machine. Ethan sat in the kitchen, his tie loose, staring at the untouched coffee. Claire's face appeared again on the digital billboard across the street, part of a news recap about last night's charity gala. She looked stunning in that navy blue dress he had personally chosen for her. He remembered the moment she walked out wearing it, the way even the air in the room shifted. He had told himself it was only good publicity. Now, seeing her beside someone else, he realized how much of a lie that had been. His assistant, Olivia, stepped into the kitchen holding a tablet. "Sir, your 9 o'clock board meeting is ready." He did not respond. "Sir?" He blinked and finally looked up. "Cancel it." Olivia hesitated. "Everything all right?" He exhaled, long and slow. "Just do it." She nodded quietly, backing away. The moment she left, Ethan opened his phone again and tapped on Claire's name. The last message from her was 2 days old, a simple, "Thanks for the flowers." He had sent them after the gala, pretending it was part of the act. Pretending, always pretending. His thumb hovered over the keyboard, but he could not type. What would he even say? "Why are you with him?" Sounded too personal. "You broke the contract" sounded absurd. He tossed the phone aside and stood up. Maybe it was time to face the truth. Contracts could not protect him from feelings. At that exact hour, Claire was sitting in a small downtown cafe, far away from the skyscrapers and glass walls of Ethan's world. She wore sunglasses to hide the exhaustion under her eyes. The man in the photo, David, sat across from her. He was her childhood friend, a photographer who had helped organize last night's charity. "You should delete the picture," Claire said softly. David frowned. "Why? It is harmless." "Nothing is harmless when people are watching," she replied. He looked at her for a moment, then sighed. "Is he still treating you like a contract?" She forced a smile. "It is not his fault. It is how he was raised." David shook his head. "Then why do you sound like you are defending him?" Claire looked out the window. The truth was simple but painful. She was. Somewhere between fake smiles and red carpet appearances, she had started to see the man behind the mask. The one who stayed up late reading reports but still made sure her father's medical bills were paid. The one who thought no one noticed when he skipped dessert but quietly placed his slice of cake in front of her. But last night when photographers asked for a shot and David pulled her close, she had seen flashes go off like sparks in a minefield. She had wanted to step away, but it was too late. The image had already been captured, and she knew Ethan would see it. She felt the ache of guilt before he ever did. Later that afternoon, back at Carter Enterprises, Ethan walked into his office. On his desk lay a single envelope with his name written in her handwriting. He opened it slowly. Inside was a short note. "I did not mean to hurt you. The photo meant nothing. But maybe what we are pretending to be means more to me than it should. I need time." The pen slipped from his hand. For a long moment, Ethan just stood there, the words sinking deeper with every heartbeat. She had cared. That realization hit harder than any deal he had ever lost. He leaned back in his chair, the city stretching endlessly below him. Somewhere out there she was walking away, and for the first time he did not want to let her. He reached for his phone again, not to demand, not to control, but to ask one simple question he had never asked before. "Where are you?" His thumb hovered, his breath caught, and for the first time the billionaire did not care about pride or image. He just wanted her back. Ethan never pressed send. His fingers trembled above the screen for what felt like an eternity before he finally locked the phone and set it aside. The question, "Where are you?" remained unsent, swallowed by pride and confusion. The following days stretched into an ache of silence. The mansion felt emptier than ever. Every room echoed with absence. Every hallway seemed colder. He tried to bury himself in work, but numbers blurred together and voices in meetings faded into meaningless noise. He would glance at his phone every hour, hoping for a message from her, but nothing came. His assistant, Olivia, noticed the change. She did not ask questions, but she left a cup of coffee on his desk every morning, the way Claire used to. One afternoon, Ethan found himself in the garage, standing in front of the black Bentley he had bought for their fake honeymoon. It had never been used. He stared at it for a long time before deciding he could not stay trapped in the same walls any longer. The city air was sharp when he stepped outside, his coat collar pulled high against the wind. He did not know where he was driving. He only knew he needed to move. Streets turned into highways, and before long, he found himself far from the noise of downtown, parked near a small neighborhood cafe. Through the window, he saw her. Claire sat alone, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly, a notebook open in front of her. He froze, unsure if he should go in. She looked different without the glamorous clothes and jewelry. She looked real, warm, almost unreachable in her simplicity. Finally, he pushed open the door. The bell above it chimed softly. She looked up, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "Ethan," she said quietly, surprise flickering in her eyes. "You found me," he nodded, his throat dry. "You left without a word." "I left a note," she replied, folding her hands together. "You did," he admitted, sitting across from her, "but notes cannot answer questions." The air between them was fragile, like a thin sheet of glass. He took a breath. "That photo, it got to me more than it should have." Claire's gaze softened. "I know, and I am sorry. It was not what it looked like." He shook his head. "It is not about that. It is about me. I have spent my entire life keeping things controlled. People, feelings, even myself. But you," he paused, searching for the right words. "You make me forget the rules." For the first time, she saw something unguarded in his eyes. "Ethan, this was never supposed to be real. You made that very clear from day one." He smiled faintly, but it was a sad smile. That was before real got involved. She looked away, her heart pounding. "You are saying things you do not mean. And you are pretending not to feel the same," he replied softly. Silence hung between them, filled with all the things they had not said in months. Finally, Claire closed her notebook and stood up. "Maybe we both need time, away from the contract, away from pretending." He rose too, his hands sliding into his pockets. "If you walk away now, there might not be anything left to come back to." She hesitated, her eyes glistening. "Then maybe that is the only way we find out what was real." And with that, she walked out into the fading light, her silhouette swallowed by the evening. Ethan stood frozen, the weight of her words pressing down on him. For the first time, there were no deals to make, no strategies to fix what was breaking. All he could do was watch her go. As the door closed, the small bell above it chimed again, softer this time, like an echo of something lost. He sat back down at her table, his hands resting where hers had been. Her coffee cup was still warm. He exhaled slowly, the truth settling in his chest like a quiet confession. For years, he had built an empire by never needing anyone. But now, sitting alone in a small cafe that smelled of cinnamon and regret, Ethan Carter finally realized what it meant to need someone for real. Ethan did not see Claire for weeks after that night at the cafe. The city went on, but something in him had stopped. He still showed up at meetings, signed contracts, and kept his public image immaculate, but his mind was somewhere else. He caught himself checking every crowd, every restaurant, half hoping to see her face. The silence between them had become louder than any argument could ever be. Late one evening, after another meaningless corporate dinner, Ethan drove without a destination until he ended up outside the Bennett family clinic. The lights inside were dim, but through the window, he saw her father sitting alone, reading. He had helped fund that small clinic months ago under the guise of a business donation, though everyone knew it was for her. He sat in the car for a long time before leaving, unable to explain why he had come. The next morning, his assistant Olivia handed him an invitation. "Sir, the annual foundation gala is next week. You are expected to attend." He nodded, though he barely cared. "Who is hosting it this year?" "The Bennett Foundation," she replied carefully. He froze. "Claire's foundation?" "Yes, sir. She is one of the event directors this time." Olivia hesitated, then added softly, "You do not have to go if it is too complicated." Ethan stared at the gold lettering on the envelope. "No," he said quietly, "I am going." On the night of the gala, the ballroom shimmered with soft golden light. The sound of laughter and champagne glasses filled the air, but Ethan barely heard any of it. Every detail reminded him of her, the floral arrangements she used to choose, the music she liked, the way she would whisper quick reminders before interviews. He felt out of place without her beside him. Then, across the room, he saw her. Claire was speaking with guests near the stage, poised and radiant in an emerald dress. She carried herself with calm confidence, the kind that came from finally standing on her own. For a long moment he just watched her, realizing how much she had changed and how much he had not. When she finally noticed him, there was a flicker in her eyes, surprise mixed with something softer, but she quickly turned back to her conversation. It stung more than he expected. A few minutes later, a journalist approached him. "Mr. Carter? Any truth to the rumors that your contract marriage has ended?" Ethan's expression remained perfectly composed, but his chest tightened. "Rumors?" he said simply, and walked away. As he did, another man approached Claire, a young executive type, confident, familiar. He handed her a folder, and she laughed lightly at something he said. That sound hit Ethan like a blade made of memory. Before he could stop himself, he crossed the room. "Claire," he said, his voice lower than he intended. The crowd around them faded as she turned to face him. "Ethan," she greeted politely, keeping her tone professional. "Congratulations on the event. It is impressive." "You did not tell me you were running the foundation now," he said. "You did not ask," she replied simply. He swallowed. "Can we talk?" "I am working," she said gently, glancing at the guests around them. "This is not the time." "Then when is?" he asked, the control in his voice beginning to crack. "When it stops being about contracts," she said softly. "When it starts being about honesty." Her words hit harder than he wanted to admit. For a moment, he just stood there, silent, surrounded by glitter and noise that no longer meant anything. Then she excused herself and disappeared into the crowd, leaving him in the same place he had always been, surrounded by everything except the one thing he actually wanted. Hours later, when the ballroom had emptied, Ethan found himself outside near the garden terrace. The night air was cool, the city glowing below like a sea of stars. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Olivia. "Good job attending tonight, sir. You looked human." He almost laughed. For the first time, he felt the weight of his choices. The empire he had built seemed small compared to the one thing he had lost because of his own pride. Somewhere inside, he knew that this night was not the end of their story. It was the test before everything changed. The next morning, headlines spread across every major business outlet. "Ethan Carter attends ex-wife's foundation gala alone." The word ex-wife hit him harder than any insult. The media did not care about truth or contracts. They only cared about stories that sold. For the first time, Ethan understood how fragile his carefully constructed image truly was. He stared at the newspaper, his jaw tight, the echo of Claire's words from the night before looping through his head. "When it stops being about contracts, when it starts being about honesty." He leaned back in his chair, eyes heavy with exhaustion and regret. Olivia entered his office quietly. "There is something you need to see," she said, sliding a tablet across the desk. It was a clip from the gala, already circulating online. It showed Ethan and Claire standing inches apart, the tension between them so visible it almost hummed through the screen. The comments below were endless. Some said they looked like enemies, others said they still looked in love. "Should I take it down?" Olivia asked. Ethan shook his head. "No, let them see it." Later that afternoon, he called a board meeting. The executives buzzed with concern over his public image, urging him to issue a statement, to deny everything. But Ethan only listened quietly, his gaze fixed on the window. Finally, he said, "Let them talk. I am done pretending." The room fell silent. It was the first time they had heard their boss sound human. That evening, Ethan left the office early, something he never did. He drove toward the Bennett Foundation building, where he knew Claire would still be working. The streets were calm, golden with the late sunset. He parked outside and hesitated before stepping out. Inside, the reception area was nearly empty, except for the sound of distant typing. Claire was in her office, surrounded by stacks of donation reports and event summaries. She looked up when he entered, her eyes wary but not cold. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" He closed the door behind him and took a slow breath. "You said you wanted honesty, so here it is." She stood, folding her arms. "All right. Then be honest." He met her gaze. "The shield of confidence gone. That night, when I saw the photo of you with him, I lost control. Not because of pride, but because it made me realize how much you mattered. I built an empire thinking I did not need anyone, and then I met you, and suddenly everything else felt meaningless." Claire's eyes softened, but she did not speak. He continued, his voice low but steady. "I know I hurt you. I know I turned something that should have been simple into something complicated, but the truth is, the contract ended the moment I started caring for you." There was silence. Claire looked down, her fingers trembling slightly. "You cannot just walk in here and rewrite the past, Ethan." "I am not asking to rewrite it," he said. "I am asking for a chance to fix it." She sighed, emotion flickering in her voice. "You think it is that easy? You disappear for weeks and then you show up with confessions?" "Because I was afraid," he said. "Afraid of being real with you. Afraid that if I let you in, you would see the man behind all this and realize he is not as strong as he looks." For a long time, she said nothing. Then finally, she walked closer. "You always talk like everything can be negotiated, like love is another business deal. But life does not work that way. I know, he said softly. That is why I am not offering a deal this time. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver key, the same one she had left behind at his penthouse. He placed it on her desk. I kept it because it reminded me of the only time I felt at home. Claire stared at the key, her throat tightening. She wanted to say something, but words failed her. Ethan stepped back, his expression quiet, almost peaceful. I will not ask you for an answer tonight, but if you ever decide you are ready to stop running, you know where to find me. Then he turned and walked out, leaving the door slightly ajar behind him. Claire stood there for a long time, the silver key catching the last light of sunset, her heart warring between logic and the truth she had been trying to deny she still loved him. That night, Claire could not sleep. The silver key sat on her nightstand, glinting in the dim light like a whisper she could not silence. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face honest, raw, stripped of all the armor she had once thought defined him. She told herself that walking away had been the right choice, that distance was what they both needed. But deep down, something inside her was shifting. The next morning, she went to the foundation early, hoping work would drown the noise in her mind. Yet even as she reviewed reports and answered calls, her thoughts kept drifting back to Ethan. Around noon, her assistant entered with a worried look. "Claire, you should see this," she said, placing a tablet on her desk. A headline glowed on the screen. Carter Enterprises under fire after leaked documents reveal family power struggle. Claire frowned and scrolled through the article. It detailed an internal dispute among the board members, questioning Ethan's leadership and suggesting he step down. She knew how ruthless that world could be. For years, he had fought to build that empire. Seeing his name dragged through mud made something twist inside her. Her phone buzzed then, a message from Olivia, Ethan's assistant. He will not ask for help, but he needs someone he trusts. Please talk to him. Claire hesitated for only a second before grabbing her coat. When she arrived at Carter Enterprises, the lobby was a chaos of reporters and flashing cameras. Security let her through once they recognized her. Upstairs, the office that had once felt untouchable was now filled with tension. Ethan stood by the window, sleeves rolled up, his tie gone, eyes dark with exhaustion. "You should not be here," he said quietly when she walked in. "Maybe not," she replied, "but I am." He turned toward her, and for a moment, all the walls between them disappeared. "You saw the news," he said. "They are trying to force me out." "Because of the leaks?" "Because of fear," he said bitterly. "Fear of change. I wanted to turn Carter Enterprises into something more than money, a place that actually matters." Claire stepped closer. "And you can still do that," he laughed softly. "You have more faith in me than I do." "No," she said gently. "I just see the man behind the mask now." Her words caught him off guard. He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment everything else faded: the empire, the board, the headlines. It was just them. "Why did you come, Claire?" he asked. "Because you needed me," she said simply. Silence filled the room, heavy but not painful. Then she added, "You once said you built your empire alone. Maybe that is the problem." He exhaled, a quiet laugh escaping his lips. "You always have a way of making impossible things sound simple." "It is not impossible," she said softly. "It just takes trust." He nodded slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing. "You should stay away from this mess," he murmured. "If they see you here, the press will turn you into a headline again." She smiled faintly. "Let them. I am tired of pretending too." For a long moment neither of them spoke. The city stretched endlessly outside the glass walls, but for the first time it did not feel like a cage. Ethan finally said, "Thank you, Claire. I do not know what happens next, but I know I do not want to face it alone." She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then do not." He reached for her hand, hesitant at first, then certain. The touch was simple, but it carried the weight of everything unspoken between them. For once, he did not need control. He just needed her. Outside, the storm that had been brewing for weeks began to break, rain streaking down the glass. But inside that office, something else was breaking too, the last of the walls that had kept them apart. For the first time, there was no contract, no deal, no act. Just two people standing together against a world that suddenly felt very small. For a few weeks, it felt like peace had finally returned. Ethan and Claire worked side by side, rebuilding both his company's image and the trust between them. She helped him create a new division focused on charity and innovation, something that showed the world the heart behind Carter Enterprises. Late nights turned into quiet conversations. Shared plans turned into laughter. For the first time, it was not about contracts or control, but about connection. Yet peace never lasts long in the world of power. One morning, as they walked into the office together, a crowd of reporters waited outside. Flashbulbs burst, questions flew through the air, and Ethan's security struggled to keep order. A voice from the crowd shouted, "Mr. Carter, is it true your company is under investigation for fraud?" Claire froze. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Ignore them," he said, guiding her inside. But inside was worse. Olivia rushed to meet them, her face pale. "Ethan, you need to see this." She handed him a file filled with printed emails and bank records fabricated, but convincing enough to look real. They made it appear as if Ethan had been funneling money into offshore accounts using the foundation's charity funds. Claire's heart sank. "This is fake," she said immediately. "Someone is trying to destroy you." Ethan flipped through the pages, his voice low and cold. "Someone inside the company. Someone with access." Olivia nodded grimly. "The board already knows. They are calling for an emergency vote to suspend your position." "When?" he asked. "Tomorrow morning." The room fell silent. Ethan leaned back, trying to process the betrayal. He had spent years building this empire, only for it to crumble in a single day. Claire reached for his hand. "We will prove it is false," she said firmly. "We will find out who did this." "It will not matter," he replied. "The damage is already done. The media will run it before the truth comes out." She looked at him, determination flashing in her eyes. "Then let us find the truth faster." That night, they went through hours of files, searching for clues. The more they looked, the clearer it became that this was not about money, it was about revenge. Someone wanted to ruin Ethan personally, not just professionally. Near midnight, Claire found something. "Look at this," she whispered. A string of anonymous transfers traced back to a consulting firm connected to his cousin, Daniel Carter, a man who had always resented Ethan's control over the company. "He used the foundation's accounts to plant the evidence," Claire said. "He wanted it to look like your idea." Ethan's expression hardened. He finally found a way to take everything. She closed the file, her voice steady. "Not everything. He cannot take your name, or what we are rebuilding." For the first time that night, Ethan smiled faintly. "You always sound like hope," he murmured. She smiled back. "That is because someone has to remind you that you are human." He looked at her then, realizing that no matter what happened tomorrow, she was the only thing that made all of it worth fighting for. Outside, dawn began to rise, painting the city in pale gold. The battle was not over, but for the first time, Ethan did not feel alone walking into it. The next morning arrived with the kind of tension that could break glass. The boardroom of Carter Enterprises was filled with men and women in suits, their whispers slicing through the air like blades. Ethan walked in with Claire beside him, her presence calm but steady, like a quiet shield against the storm. At the far end of the table sat Daniel Carter, his cousin, pretending innocence with a smile that did not reach his eyes. The chairman cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, before we proceed with this vote, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Ethan looked around the room, meeting every gaze. "For years I have built this company with integrity," he said. "I have never hidden behind excuses, and I will not start now. But what has been presented to you is a lie. The real thief sits among you." Murmurs filled the room. Daniel leaned forward smoothly. "Big words, cousin. But do you have proof?" Claire stepped up then, her voice clear and unwavering. "Yes, we do." She connected a flash drive to the projector, and a series of files appeared on the screen: transfer logs, digital timestamps, and signed authorization slips. These were traced back to a consulting firm you own under a proxy name, Mr. Daniel Carter. You used it to fabricate false donations and move money into private accounts. The room fell silent. Daniel's smile vanished. "That is impossible," he snapped. "Those are forged." "Actually," Claire said, her tone sharp as glass, "they came directly from your encrypted server. We retrieved them last night." The chairman turned toward Daniel, his expression darkening. Within minutes, the truth unfolded in front of everyone. By the time security entered the room, Daniel's protests were drowned out by the sound of resignation papers being printed. Ethan exhaled deeply, the first real breath he had taken in days. The board voted unanimously to reinstate him as CEO. But as the room cleared, Ethan turned to Claire. "You saved me," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "No, you saved yourself. I just reminded you how." For a moment neither of them spoke. The weight of what they had survived hung in the air between them. Ethan finally said, "You once told me love is not a contract. You were right. It is a choice." She looked up at him, her eyes soft. "And what are you choosing now?" He stepped closer, his voice low. "You?" The single word carried more meaning than 1,000 promises. Outside the glass walls, the city glowed under the rising sun, and for the first time in years, Ethan Carter was not thinking about power, wealth, or legacy. He was thinking about the woman who had taught him that love was the only deal worth keeping. A few months later, the world had already moved on from the scandal, but for Ethan and Claire, life had just begun again. The Carter Foundation was thriving, helping small communities and young entrepreneurs across the country. Their work had turned from obligation to purpose, from a public image to something deeply real. One crisp autumn morning, the city skyline shimmered in gold as Claire walked into the art gallery downtown. It was quiet except for soft music and the distant hum of conversations. The exhibit was called New Beginnings, sponsored by Carter Enterprises. When she stepped inside, she froze. On the main wall, beneath a single spotlight, hung a framed photograph, the one she had taken months ago, the picture that had once started everything. The caption beneath it read, "The moment I realized what matters." Her eyes filled with tears. Behind her, a familiar voice said, "It felt wrong to hide it any longer." She turned to see Ethan, dressed simply, no longer the untouchable billionaire, but a man who had learned to live again. "You kept the photo," she whispered. "It changed my life," he said. "You changed my life." He took a small box from his pocket and opened it, revealing a simple ring, no diamonds, no extravagance, just meaning. This time no contracts, just us. "Will you marry me, for real?" Her smile trembled as she nodded. "Yes," she said softly, "for real." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and for a moment, the noise of the city disappeared. There were no reporters, no boardrooms, no rules. Only two people who had finally learned that love was not a transaction but a choice they would keep making, every single day. As the crowd in the gallery applauded softly, Ethan whispered, "You were never my mistake, Claire. You were my beginning."